So it is time to welcome, at last, Dr. Lynnette Simpson, who is going to explain just for a few seconds what she does for a day job, and how, by the way, that applies to anyone who lives in Leicestershire. You can get a referral to see Lynnette. And then we will start working our way through some brilliant members' questions. So over to you, Lynnette. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for inviting me along. So I'm a clinical psychologist and I've worked for the last 10 years in the Department of Medical Psychology. We're based at the Leicester General Hospital, if people know that hospital. We're based there and we receive referrals from across UHL, so that's any hospital in the Leicestershire, so that's Glenfield, the Royal and the General. So if you are open to any consultant across those hospitals, you can ask for a referral to our department, and we accept referrals for people where their mental health difficulties are are related to their physical health. So it must be about having a health condition first and primarily, and wanting some support with the impact that that physical health condition is having on your life. That's our remit and that's what we work with. And we offer one-to-one therapy. We also offer group work for people. And it's really all about trying to improve that quality of life. So if you have a consultant in one of those hospitals, then they can refer, and you must be attached to that consultant, but also you must live in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland and have a GP in that area.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we'll crack on with the questions then. The first one is... Yeah.
Can I just ask, sorry, RuPaul, can I just say as well that in terms of the questions, I had sight of the questions beforehand, so I've tried to kind of prepare a response based on the question that's been asked, but just bear in mind that, all I have about the question asker, the person that's asked the question, is just that question. So obviously I don't know the context of your life, I don't know whether my answer will be kind of the most appropriate thing, or I'm just giving some pointers as to kind of the general themes, the things that are raised within the question, and hopefully that will give kind of a guide and a way forward. But obviously I don't know you personally. When we're in therapy, I'd sit down with you and we'd have kind of a proper discussion and develop a formulation together of what's going on, and I'd get to know you and have that relationship. So I just think that's important. So please don't think, oh yeah, that doesn't apply to me. Well, it may well not. So I'm just trying to do my best in answering what you've asked.
Thank you. So we get to question one. I constantly worry about being dizzy, with BPPV being the sole concern for me. I know that it can be resolved with manoeuvres, but every morning I wake up and I'm scared of rolling over or sitting up out of bed. So my day starts off in an anxious state. I can't completely relax going to bed because I worry about rolling over in the night. If I wake in the night, I can't get back to sleep because I worry that I'll get BPPV. I know that it's irrational, but the worry is so overwhelming. It's on my mind all the time. So my question is, are there any tips or strategies that would help me with this?
Okay, so first off in this question, what I thought was really interesting was kind of that the person said that the thoughts you were having are irrational, but that doesn't seem to be, to me, a true reflection of what you said. And I think that that's highlighted for me that little bit of a misunderstanding about anxiety and health difficulties, because we've learned from kind of a mental health context that the idea about anxiety is that something our mind has told us doesn't match the situation at hand and is out of proportion, and then the feelings that we get are anxiety. So therefore, if we solve this irrational thinking and think differently, then the anxiety will go down. But I think what you need to always remember in a physical health context, so we're talking about medical problems, real physical health problems, what you need to bear in mind is that we're applying that understanding about anxiety to real problems. So I think the first thing to do in this scenario is to stop using this idea about that being irrational thought, because it's actually sounds quite rational to me that you can trigger, from what you said, that you can trigger that health difficulty by rolling over. So it's actually a very rational thought, isn't it? Because it's based on experience that you've probably had of this happening. So it's not irrational. So having said that, we can see anxiety as an indication of threat. So which is why our anxious thoughts then get replayed over and over in our minds, because we've had a horrible experience. So our mind has cleverly remembered that for us and will remind us of the need to be aware of it, as we may not have coped very well the first time we experienced it, and we were probably quite frightened the first time this happened. And therefore, as the threat comes back or a reminder of it, such as being in bed, our anxious bodily symptoms will kick in, and then we have these anxious thoughts. Sometimes we can also get these anxious thoughts before the event because we anticipate the threat before it happens. So you mentioned in the example, before going to bed or in the morning, first thing before you move. But the thoughts in themselves are not irrational. They're based on that experience. They're based on having a frightening experience previously. In order to kind of solve this kind of anxiety kind of cycle getting into, we need to help reduce the threat itself. So my advice would be, it might help you to sit down and write a coping plan of the strategies that you use to help your health condition in this situation. So you said in the example that there were some maneuvers that resolve it. So great, then write yourself a plan for what you need to do in different scenarios which involve rolling over. Having this written out might help your mind to see, oh, look, I've got some strategies that can ease things. And you can remind yourself that you're not in that same scenario as you were when this first happened. You can cope. You have some strategies. You've got those maneuvers. And it's about learning to show your mind that you can cope with this and that you can manage it. And it's something that you can then refer to before bed or have it nearby in case you're doubting yourself. Another part to this is that you might want to explore with yourself, what's the worst case scenario? So what's the worst thing that could happen or perhaps has happened, and how did you cope or could you cope in the future? So thinking through that worst case scenario could help you to think of things to add to your coping plan and almost take that threat away or reduce the impact of the threat that that's having by having ways that you would then cope with it. The other aspect to this is calming down the anxiety itself. So you might find, and for everything I'm talking about, I'm going to give some resources and some pointers to Kevin after the meeting. So anything I mention, I will try and do kind of a little kind of handout, as it were, that has links to resources and things. But you might find calming down the anxiety, a simple deep breathing technique might be helpful, or a square breathing technique. You could also explore progressive muscular relaxation, which is something you could do to kind of help you to recognize when you're starting to get tense and when you're feeling anxious. And by practicing relaxation every day generally, you can help then to notice when you're feeling tense and learn to manage that response. Self-statements can also be helpful in these kind of scenarios. I can't write that for you because it's very much related to your personal circumstances and what might work for you to almost cajole and reassure yourself. So something along the lines of, I'm okay, I'm safe, I can cope, things of that nature can be useful. The other thing we talked about was bedtime routines. So, talking about kind of difficulty with sleeping. So again, apply this kind of general sleep advice, only going to bed when you feel sleepy tired, not lying in bed awake, if you're not asleep. So we would recommend kind of getting up after sort of 20 minutes of not sleeping and move somewhere else. However, given that this particular example is about rolling over and the anxiety around that, that might be more tricky. So it might be about having something to hand you can do when you're not sleeping that you can do in bed in that scenario. And the other aspect to this is might be having a slower routine in the morning that's part of that coping plan. So knowing how to manage the morning by getting up, using your strategies, which are part of that plan, allowing extra time to get into the day and get that momentum going. Maybe doing a relaxation technique first thing when you're in bed. So having one of these that I've explained, having one of these techniques that you could do whilst you're in bed before you attempt to start moving, getting up. Because again, if you're concentrating and focusing on that relaxation task, hopefully that will help to quieten down a bit of that kind of internal chatter that's telling you that, oh, I'm struggling, I can't manage this, what if this happens, what if this happens? So it might help to kind of distract your focus and allow your body to calm down, bring that anxiety under some control. So that's
Wow.
that's number one.
Yeah, no, there
It's
is so,
tricky. It's really
yeah.
hard. Anxiety is really difficult. But I just want you to always keep in mind that idea and that distinction about irrational thoughts. These aren't irrational. They're not, are they? This is all based on real health issues. So please never call yourselves irrational. That's really important.
Yeah, and it's about how your brain has you've experienced something like this, so it's that fight and flight response, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
It can be absolutely terrifying. And for me, I think distraction works quite well for me, as I think Lynnette knows me well. I'm going to move on to the next question. I know that getting out of the house and socializing now and then is important for my mental health, but I always pay a price over the next few days with increased dizziness and fatigue. Do you have any pacing tips for these sorts of situations which benefit me mentally but make me feel worse physically? Other than online socializing, I already do that, but it's not always possible.
Okay, so I agree. Connectivity with others is really important for our mental health and well-being. This group is absolutely, an example of that, isn't it? We need to connect, and it's great that we've got kind of another splinter group going on, a sister group. Brilliant, fantastic, because we need to connect with people. It's important. There's a little clue perhaps in the last part of the question, and what was said is that it's not always possible to even do online socializing. So when thinking about a plan to socialise, you need to acknowledge where you're at right now and what is actually realistic for you to do, and would therefore form a baseline for you about what you can manage right now. And it may be that, sadly for now, online is all you can manage. So I think that's the first part of it. It's coming to terms with what is actually possible right now. Pacing is a technique or strategy that certainly my colleagues, if you've ever come into contact with an occupational therapist, they're very keen on pacing. It's a really big key strategy, and it's designed to help people booming and busting, which means overdoing activity on the basis of feeling that you're on a good day and then crashing the next day as a consequence. So the boom and the bust. And it may be, as an aside, that a one-off occasion is totally worth the boom and the bust. For example, a wedding, you may feel that, do you know what, even if I boom and bust, it was just totally worth it. And there's always going to be scenarios of that. But if you want to then pace your activity, which means working from the same baseline every day, regardless of whether the day is a good day or a bad one, from a health point of view, can help you to level out that activity and make the boom and bust less severe. So pacing is when we consider an activity and how much of this we can manage in one go, which is taking into account how much you could manage on a good day and a bad day, and working somewhere in between as a baseline, closer to what you can manage on a bad day. And then when you set that limit, socialising is a kind of a complex task to pace. So you may need to view it as a whole activity, or you could break that down, but could be quite tricky to see it as individual bits. Ironing, for example, is an easier thing to think about in terms of pacing. How much can I do? How much ironing can I manage? Whereas socialising it's quite a complex task. So you might need to see it as a whole thing, but set that limit. With pacing, it's always important to have a timer so that we don't go over the time that we've agreed is okay for us. So I guess in the socialising sense, it's like, not kind of extending that time just because, so-and-so is now turned up and, I'll just stay out another hour, or it's not. It's setting that timer to say, no, this is what I've come for, this is what I can manage, and that's what I can do today. And then we either rest or we switch activity, switch posture, and it might be that we carry on with the activity. So again, thinking about socialising, it's about how much can you realistically manage right now, and start there. And then hopefully by pacing, the idea is that we increase it over time. You might find another way to look at it is to think about activity across the week. So like with a week planner to view, and then consider the different activities as low, medium or high demand. And when I talk about demand, that could be cognitively, it could be physically, or it could be in some aspect of your health condition, whatever that makes sense to you as to what would be a high demand kind of socialising activity and what would be low demand. So it might be, for example, being in a really busy restaurant might be really high demand because you just can't kind of pay attention to what's going on at the table with a lot going on around you. So something like that. So it's kind of like thinking about what's low, medium and high demand for you, and then plotting it out across the week so that you can then add in, where's good for me to do what I like to do and plan it. But with plenty of rest and recovery built in. So it's not about trying to plan it so that you can like boom and bust all the time. It's about actually being sensible of what's good for me to do and how can my week look so it's actually balanced. And don't forget, then you can kind of draw up a hierarchy for you of what is a low socialising activity, what's a medium, what's a high. So then you can build up a hierarchy and start building towards something. So you feel like, well, I've got that, I can manage that. Now I'll build up to this one and try something else. And don't forget, of course, to ask for help. So, for example, a lift somewhere might take a demand away, might take a part of that demand away rather than driving somewhere yourself. So think creatively about how to make socialising kind of fit for you and kind of, still have the pleasure of what you want to do. It takes some of the elements away that you would naturally or normally just get on with them and do. It might be that actually having someone take you might take out an element that before you would have just taken for granted and given. Things have got to change perhaps in how you view what it is. Okay, good. So be realistic and start where you are is the key.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question, if that's all right with everyone. I don't feel I quite know where I fit in within the world at the moment, says this next question. I can't currently work due to being badly affected. I'm very unreliable. I feel a bit lost, and my attempts to develop a positive routine is a challenge due to the constant fluctuation of symptoms. I have tinnitus, vertigo, vision jumping when walking, hearing some sounds too loud, other sounds not at all, being unbalanced, and IBS. I also feel sad, and I feel like I'm grieving at the loss of some of my old life, for example, driving. Do you have any advice as to how to come to terms with my many years? I never know how I'm going to feel or how I'm going to be at any time in the future.
Yeah, well, these are big questions, aren't they? Your first comment was something that I hear a lot when working with people with health conditions, and it's a sad fact. I think that our society, our benefit system doesn't help us to really feel like we fit in or have a purpose unless we can be a certain way. And health conditions make people unreliable, and therefore it's quite hard to fit into a working life and the way it is. I mean, we're coming some way, I think, with flexible working, particularly, the pandemic has helped push that along and that agenda. Our office now talks about blended working, which was never a possibility, ever. So, that it's great. We're moving forwards and we're doing that. We've now got the tech, we've got laptops, we can work at home, we can do things better. So absolutely, we're coming somewhere, but I hear what you're saying. I think all members would have something to say around that topic. It's clear that in what you're talking about, that there is a sense of that grief and grieving your old self, the things that make you you. And any health condition can be considered a change. So when we experience that change, we go through an adjustment process, not unlike the emotional process we go through when we lose another person. So feelings of sadness and grief are very, very common when I'm sort of meeting with people, when I'm working with people therapeutically. I think, sadly, kind of coming to terms with many years is going to be a process of working through that stage of sadness and letting go of some aspects of that old life or the person that you were. And in many respects, I feel like the way that you're talking that question, you're doing everything that is expected of you right now. You're processing that grief and you're allowing yourself time to have that feeling of being in touch with what your old life was and a sense of sadness. That is absolutely normal and an important part of this. It's an important part of moving on and adjustment. So I think you're doing the right thing. In terms of feeling sad, we know that when people are feeling sad and it feels like it's too sad in the sense of that then it might be feeling more like depression, then when we're in that situation, it may well be that you do need somewhere to talk and somebody to talk to. And that could, of course, be loved ones and friends, but it could be people in this group. We talked about that connection at the beginning, didn't we? but it might also be a health professional like myself. It might be that you need somewhere and some space to kind of talk about it, because actually it can be hard to do that in our day-to-day lives, because we can feel like we're burdening other people with our problems and our things. So it might be that you need a professional to work through that with. And again, that's absolutely okay. And I think the building blocks of the next step is to tune into what you kind of said at the end of the question, that I never know how I'm going to be at any time in the future. So I think it's time to start embracing who you are now. So stop kind of chastising yourself for being unreliable. And it's about learning to embrace that new aspect. Kevin alluded to that when he said about the hearing. I have to ask people to speak, or I have to ask people to say it again. It's part of embracing that, yeah, I'm unreliable, and that's how that goes. So it comes down, and a lot of these questions as we go through are coming down to this sense of the expectations that we're placing on ourselves, and accepting that your life is less certain, it can be harder to plan, and you might need to change plans at the last minute. So I think a lot of that work is about coming to terms with that, really, in terms of moving forward. I like the notion of the routine that was mentioned in that question. I think that's really positive. I think, yes, we all need a sense of routine, and certainly from a sort of mental health point of view, from avoiding low mood, avoiding depression, we know that routines and having routines are really important to help us to come out of those experiences. So I like that idea. But perhaps you also need a kind of get out clause written in. So again, you'll endeavour to kind of keep to your routine. But when this isn't possible, then there's got to be that plan B, and work from that routine, the plan B routine, which is gentler, has lower demands on you, and is doable. Because again, what you're doing is kind of beating yourself up for having to not follow the routine that you set yourself in the first place. And we get ourselves tangled up. So importantly, have that plan B. It sounds like you need it at times, and that's going to be important. So it might be a much gentler routine that's not got as many demands.
Thank you, Lynnette. Kevin?
Yeah, I just add a point here, which I think is another complication. By the way, I could have easily written that question in my first 3 or 4 years of Meniere's. That could be me. The complication is, if we were talking about someone with a permanent disability, then I'd say, yeah, you need to grieve, it's gone, that old life. But the complication here with the vast majority of us dizzy folk, it is normally a temporary. It might be a long term, but things get better.
Yeah.
And I'm always conscious, especially when talking to fellow members or in the charities, that I think I potentially do more damage by talking about a permanent change, because it probably isn't a permanent change. I thought at the time, and I know why, with everything going on around me, not understanding Meniere's, I thought my life was over. How wrong I was. I've gone on to lead the most brilliant life, not really affected by Meniere's whatsoever. But in the early days, it's very difficult to believe that. But that I see as another complication, that it's almost we're treating a temporary situation that requires all that care and counselling that a permanent change requires. But I just wanted to add to, especially everyone listening and watching the future video, many of us will get back to a much better quality of life. But I don't know how you deal with temporary grieving. But that's all I wanted to add, that I think there's that layer of difference with our hidden disability that will and can get a lot better for most of us.
So what I've said, it's about all those things for now, aren't they? In that scenario, it's saying that you still need to kind of do those kind of processes, I think, in terms of that adjustment. And I think that they are important kind of processes, particularly around the expectations about being unreliable. But in that sense, it's about saying that is for now. That for now, this is what I need to do.
I think my message always to everyone is never give up the hope.
Yeah,
things will get better. But I know that doesn't help the here and now.
Yeah.
You know, when I'd gone through a vertigo attack and couldn't move for the next 24 hours and felt as though I was no good to the world or anyone, it doesn't help to say, well, keep hoping. But I just thought I'd mention that it is a changeable feast. And also I was talking to someone yesterday saying life with a balance condition is a bit like snakes and ladders. You can go for weeks or months feeling I'm getting over it. I'm getting better. I've not had an attack. And then bang, out of nowhere, you're literally on the floor, back where you started, which again just adds to the anxiety. Sorry, Ruth, I'll leave you to the next question. Thanks.
Kelly, can we just go through? I think there are some messages coming up. It might be worth just kind of reading one or two of those, and reacting to some of the questions or the answers and experiences.
Yeah, I think people were very much kind of agreeing with sort of what Kevin was just saying, particularly in terms of Anna's just put that, you know, the temporariness of some balance disorders makes it much harder to accept where you are. And for a long time, she was waiting to get better so her life can start again. And then we've got humans are not machines. I think the way many things are set up, forget that. Yeah, I get that completely. I think we've got a question that's popped in. And it's, how does vestibular disorders correlate with ASD? I'm guessing ASD is autism spectrum disorder, but correct me if I'm wrong.
I would imagine that's, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, I don't know, I can't really answer that. I'm not a specialist in ASD.
Okay.
That's okay. Kevin, do you know anything about that?
I don't, but as ever, I will refer to my friend Dr. Google and let people know later what we find. I know, Rupal, Kelly, you'll agree that it's been such a journey with the support group for these first few years. We've found out so much more. It never ceases to amaze me how complex it is, how many different forms of balance disorder there are, and then layer on top of that other health issues. It's just a never-ending smorgasbord of issues. But no, I don't know that. And by the way, to any new members, we always say we're not medically trained. We don't talk about treatment. We rarely talk about things that we leave to clinicians. We're here to do everything else, which is an awful lot of how do you live your life when you can't stand up. But over to you, Rupal, if you want to carry on.
I'm going to move on to the next question, and bear with me. There's a bit of an explanation here as well before we get Lynnette's reaction. And I think, again, a lot of us will relate to it in some shape or form. This question says, I've been finding it difficult to communicate with what is going on with me to others. I can feel frustrated or upset by people's responses when it becomes clear they don't understand. Some people have implied my mania is a psychological issue I will recover from. A family member suggested when I described struggling during a train journey the other day that I just needed to relax and I wouldn't have these problems. Last week, a member of the general public asked why I was walking so slow and if I was blind. My vision goes up and down as I walk. When I explained it's a vestibular disorder, she attempted to offer several solutions as though my consultant wouldn't have already thought about these possibilities. I know she was intending being kind, but then when standing in a lift, she attempted to move my hands to what she thought was a better hand-holding position on a steadying handle. I would like any advice on how I can make important people who I've already given charity leaflets to understand the realities of what I'm dealing with. Also, explain to random general members of the public enough information to enable them to have an answer, but be firm enough to stop them becoming overbearing. I'm finding my day-to-day life at the moment very challenging. So trying to work out how to communicate with others about myself is causing me to be a bit upset. And I think we can all, in some shape or form relate to that.
Yeah, and I think, certainly in terms of, the people that I see, a lot of kind of the concerns about having a health problem is the lack of understanding from other people. And we're also talking about kind of balance conditions, so they're not health conditions that are necessarily out there that get a lot of press or representation in places. So it can be difficult when, comments or things are, people trying to be nice and helpful when they're levelled at you. It's be difficult. And I think that the notion of how the psychological component to your experiences must be frustrating to hear. And I think what's better said is that managing any anxiety arising from a health condition may help you to cope better with the condition. So like the first question when we talked about kind of anxiety keeping us awake at night. So it's disappointing to kind of hear that inference that managing, psychological aspects will resolve the condition in the first place. It's not very appropriate to kind of say that. So in terms of kind of managing communication for loved ones, it comes back to, I guess, having that sit-down conversation about how the condition affects you. And I think what you picked up on in terms of that, the charity leaflets, I get that, because I guess for that loved one, the charity leaflet isn't you, is it? It's not kind of describing everything about you. So it might be hard for the loved one to kind of relate to that or understand it, or they may not really appreciate then how debilitating the condition might really be for you. So it might be that you can kind of discuss when it comes back to kind of coping plans or flare-up plans, having something that you can kind of share and have some involvement with your loved one about how they can help you at times when you're struggling. So having that agreed together, if you can sit down and write the things that you might need help with and the roles that they can play, because often people can feel quite helpless as to know like how to help you in situations. So if you can give them kind of practical roles, or it might be emotional support, I don't need you to necessarily do much other than kind of, be there at the end of the day and, give me a hug and a cup of tea, whatever it is, kind of spell it out. So people might need a bit of kind of, an understanding about how to really kind of, relate it to you and your scenario. So you might find with those discussions to sit down, set some kind of boundaries about what you might want to focus on when you're having that discussion, do it in kind of a neutral place together, and set kind of time limit and structure to it, keep interruptions out of the way when you're having that conversation. And I think it's important to be kind of assertive in your style of communication. So use lots of I statements. I statements can be really helpful. So I feel a certain way, rather than saying, you don't care about me. Actually say, I feel that when this situation happens, when this scenario happens, that you don't care about me. That's the way it's making me feel. If you own it as that's how I feel, rather than this is a fact or you are this, it's a much better kind of way to go about things. And in all kind of assertive communication, it's about trying to do it at a time when things are calm. So not having those conversations in the heat of the moment, but actually doing it at a different time when you feel you're calm and you've got time to explore it and talk to somebody properly. So being clear, concise in what you say. So don't kind of pad things around, just be concise with somebody about what's going on and what you need, and be prepared to compromise. So how can you kind of compromise if there are things that are kind of flagged up where you ended up in kind of arguments? Well, what's that about, and can you resolve it together? And be kind of specific when we're making requests of people. So again, when you're making requests of how people, want people to be, it's I feel like such and such when this is happening. I prefer it if you did or said such and such. And I think with the general public, I think that's one as a group. I'm sure there are people who have a stock answer that they would give people for the general public. I think it is, as you said in the question, about having something very short. A short statement is best, and a polite decline of that assistance. But I think that's one for members. I'm sure you've got a way that you handle that. I don't know whether anybody can put that in a chat or whatever. But I think it's about how you respond. Is it a short statement? I'm sure people have got them. Has anybody got one that they use?
Kelly, I think people have put some things in the chat box.
Not in response to Lynnette's question just yet. People are more talking about the sunflower scheme again and kind of reiterating how that's really handy. And then we've got another question that's popped up as well,
which we'll kind of do at the end. Is there anyone that wants to respond to sort of what Lynnette has been saying? How do other people respond or cope?
Particularly
anyone?
when out and about, somebody were to come to you, how do you?
Anyone want to put the hand up? I can try and come to you quickly. So there's got anyone? How do you deal with a situation when you're out and about and somebody approaches you and quite often can be quite patronising, and you just want to,
I think when it's happened to me, I've just been very much, thank you very much, for your comments. I've got a balance disorder, and kind of, almost close the conversation down.
Yeah, definitely.
I did that today, actually. It's really weird. Just because I'm kind of getting used to not using my stick out and about as much in my new place of work, in my old place of work, because it's in the city centre and it's slightly different surroundings. The building is a lot of glass and what have you. I actually got in the car this morning before I went to work and I thought, do I take my stick? Don't I take my stick? Do I take my stick? Don't I take my stick? And part of my brain was like, if I don't take my stick, people at work will think, oh, what's happened there then? Question me because of that. And part of my brain was going, but if I actually do want to try not taking my stick. But then what if I get stuck in the city centre? Because there's so many different levels, the pavements are different and so on. I didn't actually know what to do with myself. I sat in the car this morning thinking, am I a fraud? Because I'm okay without my stick elsewhere. I was questioning myself thinking, I feel like a fraud. I must be a fraud. Why do I need a stick when I go into the city centre? And it was just the most bizarre moment this morning.
I think
it was weird.
I think again with balance conditions, we all occasionally get, do they call it imposter syndrome? Because some days we can feel great, as though depending what the condition is, some are they're hourly, daily, but I know for myself, I've had some days where I thought, I'm a real imposter fraud because I can walk straight and my hearing's quite good today. But my message to everyone is just have confidence, and with you, do what is right for you and not what you think others might take a dim view on, not understand. To hell with them. My favorite saying there is if worrying about what others thought ever made a difference to my life in a positive way, then I should do it. But it never has. No one's ever rushed up to me and said, wow, I think you're doing a really great job. Well done, your life. So why would I worry about people going, oh, he's doing the wrong thing? Just don't worry about others. Worry about yourself, what you want to do. Difficult in early days with a balance condition because you haven't got that confidence. And times I've had people say to me, I don't like to go out. I worry people will think I'm drunk on drugs. And it's like, don't worry. You're not drunk. You're not on drugs. So if you feel able to go out, go out. And if you want to walk without a stick, walk without a stick. If you want to walk with two sticks. It's fine. We've got this infinitely variable condition. So the last thing you need to do is heap on top of you what you imagine the rest of the world is thinking, because they're probably not anyway. But that, my message is confidence. But I know what you mean, Ruth. It's so difficult sometimes. It's before that, simply going, well, do I go out or not go out? Can I drive? Can't I drive? There's all these things go through your mind. But,
are we just talking? Just the some of us that have spoken up. Is it just us, or is it everyone else that feels the same? Just out of a show of hands, occasionally, yeah. Oh, thank goodness, that makes me feel a whole lot better. That's for sure. It's not just us. It's not in our head. Claire's just put. I think I have a switch stick that folds and goes into a bag. That might not be a bad bad idea for me to do that. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question. With my balance issues, I never know how I will feel from day to day. I find myself turning down invites, which is very unusual for me. I need to get my confidence back, but not sure how to achieve this. I was diagnosed with BPPV, which I feel has steadily got worse. Can you give me some suggestions regarding this problem? Maybe meditation, which I have tried, but not very successfully. Lynnette?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, we're back to this unpredictability of health conditions, which we've kind of touched upon. And it appears that, the question asker is a sociable person, and the health condition has affected the way that you like to see yourself, the person you like to be, the identity you like to uphold. And in terms of regaining confidence, again, it appears that it's difficult right now because you're saying that your condition's been worsening. So your success might again lie in just softening that expectation you're placing on yourself to be sociable and be that thing. Right now, that expectation is not helpful. It might lead you to overcommit and then have to cancel plans or overdo by going anyway, and either way you end up feeling kind of rubbish. So I think, like we talked about earlier, that's steady progress. So reflecting on the social calendar and the demands of those different events, starting small, something that you can achieve, and having that success, you can then build on it. But it is about kind of listening to what your body is telling you, just like when we were talking about, do I take my stick or not? You take it based on, do you need to take your stick, not on how other people will view whether you've got your stick or not. And that's the key. But also, talk to those people you're socializing with. It might be that you can talk about how your health is impacting on the event that you usually do with them, and you don't like to turn things down. You don't like to avoid and say no. And it's not just you trying to, is it called ghosting now? Ghost friendship? Yeah, ghosting. You're not just trying to kind of, turn people down and not want to be their friend. It's about, look, it's just the event's a bit difficult for me. I'm finding that hard, that we usually do this, but I'm finding it hard at the moment. And then problem solve together. And it might be that there's an easier thing that you can do together that's easier for you to do while this is happening and while you're in that kind of flare up, rather than kind of total avoidance. And then you start losing momentum with people. In terms of meditation, you might find compassion focused therapy meditation helpful. So compassion focused CFT, it's really good. It's something that I'm sort of discovering at the moment. It's not something that was there when I trained, but it's something I'm learning about. But it's about talking to yourself in kind of a kinder, more compassionate tone and learning how to self-soothe. So it's quite good when you kind of need to give yourself a break. A compassion-focused therapy approach is really positive. So again, I'll send a link to some resources for that, because I think that might be a relaxation approach. If you're finding meditation isn't doing it, something like that might do it, because it's about learning to kind of connect with a kinder version of yourself, trying to be kinder towards yourself rather than kind of beating yourself up for the things that you can't do right now. It's tough. You don't need to add, as we said in that answer before, that actually you don't need to add on the complexity of beating yourself up with what you're already doing and going through. So that might be positive, I think.
Thank you. Compassion focused therapy?
Compassion focused therapy is CFT.
Thank you for that. Kelly, I think people are they commenting? We've got some comments. I think I've got you on. You're on mute, Kelly. Sorry.
All right, no, I'm back. There's quite a few people just kind of commenting on sort of their experiences, and other people are offering advice. I think there's been discussions about somebody feeling like they're about to pass out at times, and how it can be worse in foreign countries. Right. So something that again other members can relate to, and they've been offering some countermeasures, I should say. So right. The suggestion from one member was squeezing arms to the side of body, tightening their bottom and legs, and also finding somewhere to sit down and breathe. So what you're talking about, Kelly, is like an applied tension. So if you feel like we're passing out, sometimes you do the opposite. So you don't relax more, you actually, if you have call it like a vasovagal correction, you actually tense. So yes, that's brilliant
idea. Yeah,
I think that's all that's going on for the time being.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question. I have had a balance illness now for more than 2 years. I have periods of feeling I may be getting better, but this is always followed by periods of more illness that completely stops my life. I feel that I'm coping less well now than I did earlier on. I do not have suicidal thoughts, but I am worried that I may start having them if things carry on getting worse, if that makes any sense. What should I do? What should I do to not get to such a bad low point? And if I did get to that point, where do I turn to help for, please?
Yeah, so in terms of worrying about your mental health, worrying that you might need some help, then of course there are things that you can do. If you are based in Leicestershire, Leicester, then our website, LPT, so the Leicestershire Partnership Trust, has a website, and it has kind of a button. As soon as you go onto the homepage of that website, you can click in the corner, I need help now, and it will then load up a page that will tell you what to do and where to go. In LPT, again, we have the central access point where you can call for advice, and that's open 24/7. So that's, again, an important number to keep, particularly if you are feeling that you are in a crisis. So that's an important number. Again, I can kind of give signposts to these resources after this. And also remember that you can always talk to your GP about kind of advice, medication for mental health, referrals onward to places. And again, as I said at the beginning, if you're open to any hospital consultant in Leicester, then you can ask for a referral to our service here. So there are things absolutely that you can do. I think there's a lot important in what you said, and the stages of emotion that we go through with a health condition. Psychologists, we would always see them as ever changing, because we can feel we're further on and we're moving forwards, but then a setback can plunge us back in terms of an earlier stage of that adjustment. So the stages of adjustment kind of being that kind of shock when we first experience a health problem, to denial, anger, bargaining, low mood, depression, and then moving forwards and adjustment. But crucially, once we kind of feel like we're adjusting to something, we need to have our setback plan. And that might be a setback plan physically, but also emotionally, like how you're managing a setback emotionally. And with fluctuations in your health, it sounds like the fluctuations are then impacting on your mood and sending you kind of back to that earlier stage of feeling low mood. And the reason for this, of course, is that, again, you're feeling that you were in control, like life was progressing and things were getting better. But now this setback has led to you feeling like you've lost a bit of control and you've had a bit of a wobble. And it also demonstrates that kind of exhaustion that can come from the relentlessness of a health problem. And especially if kind of things get better, then there's a setback, then things get better. It's a constant kind of relentlessness that people are having to experience. So I'm just acknowledging that as well. And I guess the key is in terms of psychologically, it's about having that kind of setback plan, which could include the things that you need psychologically to bolster you when health gets in the way. One of the ways to do this is to develop kind of a self-soothe box or list, which details kind of key things that will help you to feel better, when you're feeling kind of low. The other thing is about this idea, which is borrowed from ACT. So if you like kind of that approach, acceptance and commitment therapy, so an ACT psychology approach, it talks very much about towards and away moves. So towards moves and away moves. So when we're hit psychologically with challenge, it's kind of thinking about what can I do to help me go towards kind of getting on and living my life how I want to live it, and what's taking me away. And part of what might be taking you away is that feeling of kind of, I'm getting hooked in these thoughts, because when you have a setback, it reminds you of other setbacks you've had. It reminds you of when your health condition is at its worst and what that feels like. So it can remind you of all the past events, and then you're there, you're hooked in, and you're there, and you're kind of focusing then on the past and your experiences and how awful it all is. So to balance that, it's about trying to unhook from those kind of unhelpful thoughts. So one example of that is a leaves on the stream exercise, which again you can get on YouTube. You don't need anything special for that, but again I'll signpost something on the after this meeting. But it's leaves on the stream, where you kind of imagine a river with like lots of leaves on the river, and then you kind of watch it. You're sat on the bank of the river watching the river flow, and the river is kind of representative of all your thoughts just flowing by. and then any kind of unhelpful, negative thoughts that you're experiencing, you attach them to a leaf and let that leaf kind of go down the river. And as many thoughts come up in your mind, they all go on a leaf and they go down. Some might get stuck and refuse to go along, but some may flow. And it's kind of helping you to learn by doing that kind of technique. As kind of, it might not sound, you think, well, okay, how's that going to help? But it helps because you learn to unhook when you're getting in that negative spiral. When you're getting in those unhelpful thoughts, you'll learn, I'm getting into that negative cycle. I need to stand back from the way I'm thinking. I need to have a moment to stand back from this and not get hooked in. And then I'm moving away from what I want life to be like and how I want to live my life. So it's all about learning to observe your thoughts, that your thoughts are not facts. They are not something that is true. It's when we bind it. So ACT talks a lot about fusion. So we fuse, so we think I am useless rather than I'm having the thought that I'm useless because I'm having a setback. We say to ourselves, I'm useless. We've fused with our thoughts as if your thought is accurate description of what's going on. It's not an accurate description. It's just that you feel that way in that moment, and you feel that way, and you've got those thoughts in your mind. So doing these kind of techniques can help us to unhook, stand back. Mindfulness is another big kind of meditation strategy that people use to learn to unhook from these thoughts, to help us to feel more kind of resilient, that we're in charge of our thoughts, we're not letting ourselves get carried away. And it's ultimately about being in the present where things are at, rather than going into the past and all the kind of difficulties that we've had. So mindfulness is another key technique that might be useful in that. So yes, I'll give you some links to those things.
Brilliant. Kelly.
Lynnette, can I ask you, just from one of the things that's popped up in the chat, tell me, I might have missed it, so I was kind of monitoring, but can you tell us a little bit more about acceptance therapy? Somebody's mentioned it in terms that they found it quite difficult to put into practical use. Just wonder if there's any tips maybe that you could explain around for that.
Yeah, it can come across as quite a kind of woolly and nebulous thing. I think acceptance and commitment therapy is all about that idea around kind of accepting kind of the now, where things are at the moment, and helping people to kind of move forwards with their lives on the basis of values, so the things that are important to them. In the questions that we've got to come, I've got some examples of how we're putting that idea into practice. So bear with us, because it will come up in the questions.
Brilliant.
So use kind of ACT principles, but it is very much about this idea that we live by our values, and we try to kind of everything we're doing, all our goal setting links back to the things that are important to us. But mindfulness is a part of acceptance and commitment therapy, because it's learning not to get hooked into these thoughts and run with them. It's learning to let those things go. Learn a lot of kind of diffusion techniques. So it can feel quite woolly and hard to grasp. I appreciate that. There's a good book, this kind of Living with the Enemy. That's quite a good book. This Ray Owen one, which I can signpost to. That's quite a good book because it kind of explains in a kind of a good way the different aspects of the therapy. But I'll tell you when we're touching on it. But it is really helpful for health problems.
Great, thank you. I'm going to carry on with questions. Hopefully we'll have time at the end to come back to things, or if there are any additional questions that people have got, so please bear with. I have many ears and the associated hearing and tinnitus symptoms. The attacks and all that comes with it have left me feeling worthless and useless to myself and my family. Being male, I feel that I should be able to get over this problem and get better, but I can't. And on top of all the health problems, I am now feeling very bad inside and long for the time when I was healthy. What can I do to be more positive and not feel like I am a millstone around everyone's neck?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is an example now of how we can use this kind of ACT idea in action. So there's these kind of big concepts that are talked about in that kind of question around worthlessness and uselessness. If that's the right thing, uselessness. Yeah, which suggests to me that in life generally, as many of us do, you like to feel worthy and useful to others. So that suggests to us that who you like to be is bound up with wanting to be useful to the world, to other people. So this is kind of an act demonstration of kind of getting into a sense of what makes up somebody's identity, what is core to you, what is important to you. This is act in action. So it seems there's also something from your past which has led you to have an understanding of yourself as someone who solves problems, is able to cope, a problem solver, a doer. Okay, so that's kind of the key things that I'm picking up. And what I would do with people from an ACT point of view is that we understand what it is that drive people's kind of personality, the people that they are, the people they like to be, what's driving you, what are those kind of core beliefs, those key things, what is it that kind of makes you you. So the way forward in terms of this question is to think about reevaluating the way that you're seeing yourself and what demonstrating those characteristics of being useful means. So you have these set of rules that you live by that are demonstrating that you're useful and worthy. So you're either useful or you're the millstone around people's neck. So we've got this opposite thing going on. So you're living like it's one or the other. So it's that or it's that. It's an opposite. I'm either useful or I'm a millstone. Moving forwards, it's about freeing that notion of what it means to be useful to other people by redesigning how you can live out that value in your everyday life. So what it means to be useful just needs a little bit of redesigning, a little bit of engineering. So the millstone that you're feeling is related to that belief. And again, just as an aside to this, we can be mind readers, of course, of what we think other people are thinking of us. So is that really true that people are thinking of you as the millstone around people's neck? You know, is that how people view you? So we can imagine that people are thinking that of us. Hopefully that isn't the case. And others in your life will see that value that you have in their lives without you needing to do X and Y to demonstrate it. If on the flip side you are getting comments or actions suggesting that, you know, you are this millstone around people's neck, then there's a bit there about what they're expecting of you. And it's saying to me that what people are expecting of you is the same as what you were able to do in the past. So it's helping other people to understand that you can't do X and Y in the same way anymore. So when we're going through kind of a change and a health change, we also need to remember that those around us are also going through that change. So the tasks that we do for people and the things that we do that are helpful, our loved ones are benefiting from, of course, and won't want things to necessarily change. So they might drive you, even if that's unintentional, to continue to do things in the same way for us because they're benefiting from it, they're getting something from it. So it might be the key, and this is where kind of the ACT kind of comes in, it's about considering the expectations that you're placing on yourself to do things that directly link to the value relating to being useful. So we need to think about what being useful actually means, deconstruct that a little bit, soften it a bit, and acknowledge that while that might be a helpful way of viewing yourself before, it's not fit for purpose right now. And attempts to carry on in that same way are not going to be fruitful. So instead, you need to really think about, well, how else can I demonstrate that I am useful to other people? There might be other ways that are possible for you and are more realistic about how you can demonstrate that value. What you're probably downplaying and dismissing is that you are probably doing lots of things that are useful, but you have that expectation of what you think it means to be useful, and you're trying to match that all the time, but it might be you just need to come down a peg or two from what you think usefulness means, because you might be dismissing lots of things that you are doing that are very useful to other people. And then the other side of it is keep managing other people's boundaries and learning to explain the boundaries that you have, getting used to saying no without guilt. I can't do this anymore, but how about I help you out with this instead? And you're kind of in control of that and not backing down because you want to be helpful to people. And start small again, start with a kind of situation that you can start with. And I think, again, a further note there about the problem solving part of it, I should be able to get over this problem and get better, is what kind of the person had put. Whenever we start using that language of shoulds and oughts and must to, it kind of indicates that we're hitting on something central about our values and how we like to be. And sadly, health difficulties don't always equate to kind of clear-cut problem solving. So the medical world will do so much, our self-management strategies that we're talking about today will do so much, But sometimes we can't approach health difficulties in the same way as other problems or other challenges that we've had in our lives. That isn't always a straightforward kind of fix or cure. Sometimes it takes a bit of time to get to that point, or get to that cure, or get to that fix, or it might not be there, don't know. It's about expecting yourself to kind of overcome things because you're a good problem solver is probably, not really fair to you, really. Cut yourself a bit of slack. You're doing your best. You're doing your best. And I think I can't quite see the chat, but I'm trying not to keep the chat up. But I think someone had put there about the gentleman asking this question is a big deal.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. Like, that is fantastic that we're having that. Yeah, we're having that question posed, really, because it's a lot about not only our experiences and what makes us us, but also society and how we're kind of constructing what being a man means, what being male means. The responsibilities and jobs and an idea around what that means and our identity and what we have to live up to and match up to is something we need to keep chipping away at in terms of our society, don't we, and how we view these things. So I don't know what else is in the chat, Kenny.
Just people agreeing, like you said, with how just asking the questions and you then obviously answering them in this forum, is going to be so useful, obviously for the people here, but the wider impact when this goes on, our website and on our social media pages. And very useful person, I feel. Definitely.
Yeah, 100%. I am in my 40s and was working full-time in a job I loved. I am now unable to work full-time, and even part-time is difficult to know when I will be well enough or not well enough to go to work. I am very low mentally and very low with my physical energy levels because of my illness. I feel now that my employer is wanting to get rid of me, and various things are being said about myself and being able to work. I know this is an employment issue, but my question is, how do I find the strength mentally to be able to cope with talking to my employer and probably having the fight to be heard or get over my point of view, as I am at my weakest stage ever in my life? So it's the next question.
Yeah, and I think, again, I'm pretty confident that members will have kind of perhaps better information about organisations that can support in terms of employment issues. I'm sure people will have ideas. Things that I would kind of know about or would advise people on are things such as Citizens Advice. There's a charity, Helping Hands, in Leicester that can help with kind of thinking through rights. A union rep, if that's appropriate for kind of the job that you do. There's a quality advisory support service, which again offers information about kind of employment. There's Power as well. That's another organisation that can help with advocacy, because it might be that you need some help with advocacy around this issue. Occupational health referrals are vital for people, HR departments, things like that. If you have them in that kind of working environment wherever you are, an occupational health referral can be really useful in terms of supporting and backing up the things that you need in order to do your job. And it is all about kind of having an understanding of what these equality acts do. Yeah, someone's put trade unions. Yeah, union, definitely. They can help you put that into perspective in terms of what kind of those equality acts are saying. So those organisations can help with that and make sure that you're kind of, your rights are being looked after. But I'm hoping that people who've had this experience will also have other contacts they might share in this chat about places they go. And I think outside of that, it really is about kind of having time to sit down and kind of clearly write out what support you do need in terms of your support at work, and what would need to be done in terms of those adjustments that need to be made for you to manage your working life. Putting it down clearly in bullet points might be useful. Something that you can refer to very quickly in a meeting, so that if you're having a meeting or discussion about it, you're not flustered, but you've got it all kind of written down and rehearsed. So rehearsing kind of the points, the main things that you want to kind of think about and change, but having a look at those kind of policies in terms of what adjustments employers have to make can be quite useful to give you the information to know, well, okay, if that's the law, then these are the things that could be done with my employer. So yeah, but I think I'm hoping that people will have experience of this, perhaps that, well, not hopefully that I have experience, but hopefully they'll have some answers if they have had that experience, and some advice. Yeah.
Kevin's just put something on the chat. Yeah, you might as well just say it, Kevin.
Yeah, it was, well, two things. My bad, we hoped by now to have a page dedicated to employment by using some of our members' experience of good and bad experience, and some good practice by employers as well. And the other thing I just added on the chat, which I think everyone should be aware of, a lot of employers feel when someone develops a balance issue, they'd rather not be employing you. Fortunately, in the UK, life's not that simple. If you're an employer, there's a process to go through. Even so, a lot of employers will try and ignore that and bully you out or unfairly dismiss you. It's just worth letting your employer know that, God forbid, if it ever went to an unfair dismissal process, a tribunal, there is unlimited damages against that employer if they're found not to have followed the process. And the reason why I suggest all employers should be made aware of that is they're more likely to do the right thing and follow correct process if they're aware of how much it can cost them if they get it wrong. So I know it's difficult as an employee to put that information to an employer, but it's worth getting them to know it somehow. And that, again, when we've got our page on the website, we're going to suggest members then give that link to their employer, so they can read a bit about how they can work, should work with people with these hidden disabilities. Very difficult area. And I say that question about what the last thing you want when your life's been turned literally upside down is the threat of losing your income and just being cast aside. So it's a really tricky area. Some of our members probably have not helped themselves, where they get into the state of mind thinking they are useless and fit for nothing, so therefore they deserve to be cast aside. It's just wrong. It's just wrong thinking. And with the temporary nature of this, we would hope employers would work more constructively with people affected at that moment in time.
In my bedroom.
So things would get better. But there'll be more on our website, but that's my bit for now.
Karen,
Really.
why didn't you answer?
I think I need to mute somebody.
Yes, you do. I think it's Sylvia. I don't want to point her out, but it's Sylvia. Please, I'm on mute.
Where's Sylvia?
I think it's also useful to mention that when you're in a workplace, you can have like an advocate come with you to any meetings with an employer. So if you've got a meeting with your line manager, it doesn't have to. A lot of the time, that advocate tends to be a member of the trade union, if you're a member, and you can get that access to that support. But you can have, just another colleague there. It doesn't have to be the formality of a trade union person, and they can help advocate and help you get your points across to your employers and get that support. And it was quite interesting when the question came out, because I felt like I'd written it myself and I was like, I don't think I sent it that question, but I really identify with that situation. And I remember one meeting I had with an employer, I took one of my friends in my team with me, and she sat and wrote notes for me because I couldn't kind of take in the conversation and what was being said and respond and kind of document everything as well. So that I would really strongly suggest that as an option as well.
Thank you. The next question: I have a long-term balance problem and have tried many treatments so far. I understand that grieving and anger are normal for balance problems and other health problems, but I cannot get rid of my anger with the world, and especially my family and friends, who seem to think I'm either lying or crazy or both about how my life is now so affected by this illness. I know being angry doesn't help me or anyone else. How do I stop feeling this when everyday things are said that make me angry?
Yeah, anger. Yeah, so anger. So yeah, we've covered ideas already, kind of, haven't we, about kind of communicating with others. I guess in managing your own anger in relation to this, it might be again about that reflection on the expectations we're having of other people. So anger can come from a sense of unfairness, or when an unspoken rule gets broken, and it's that instinct that gets us kind of pumped up then to kind of to tackle or escape from the threat. And in this case, kind of the anger may be coming from what's being implied by others' responses to you, that you're a liar, that you're crazy. And those ideas might be particularly hurtful if you've kind of prided yourself on being an honest person, or someone that's does quite well with their mental health, a quite stable person, a strong person. So it might really hurt when people are implying that you're not something that you kind of pride yourself on, or that you feel, you know, is important to you. So it's kind of recognizing why it is that, you know, you're getting angry in those scenarios, and recognizing that. And again, other people's expectations can be very frustrating, assuming that you kind of, you know, need to kind of just get on with things, spring back into kind of what you were like before. So you might become less tolerant and irritable. And anger, of course, is kind of, again, a kind of a cover-up. It's showing us other emotions that are underneath that, like sadness and regrets and fear. So I think it's important, when thinking about your own anger in that scenario, that fireworks don't just kind of go off. It's about recognizing that we're getting triggered by a situation, the spark, and our thoughts are then racing to some issues that we have about it, that fuse, and then we're going into full alert in our bodies. So that's the dynamite, and then the explosion is what we do with it, shouting at someone, door slamming, arguing, throwing something. That's how it's then coming out as the firework. So it's about diffusing that anger before it gets started, and even doing something about the cause of the trigger in the first place. So helping you gain that education about I am not lazy and I am not this is important. But again, reflect on those scenarios and what's going on at the very start of them. What is it about the particular words people are using that's really kind of pressing your buttons and really kind of upsetting you? And it might be that then you're aware that situations are coming up that could easily trigger you to get angry. And that then presents us with an opportunity to either avoid the scenario altogether or some aspect of the scenario. So, you know, listening to someone for a little bit and then say, yeah, okay, I think we need a break here, time out. So learning to manage then your thoughts and what's going on, and putting those thoughts, to rest before kind of you hit the kind of dynamite stage. In terms of managing the body tension in the situation, it might help to kind of get rid of that energy that you're feeling from the anger. So, a brief kind of walk, or kicking a football, or punching a cushion, or whatever, just that little burst, and getting rid of it in whatever way you can kind of do or manage. Slow breathing. So again, making that out breath kind of longer than the in breath. So, having a really long kind of out breath, making yourself do that to kind of calm that reaction down. The squeeze and release. So you can just simply clench your fist and let it all out, and then just let it go in the situation. Release that tension. Generally relaxing day to day will help keep your kind of levels down generally, if you kind of learn to do a relaxation technique regularly. So doing some meditation or something regularly will help you. And if kind of anger's overflowing, then it's again about having something that you can do. Like, it could be tearing up or scrunching up some paper, it could be splashing cold water on the face, go outside, have a bit of a shout into the garden, slam a good old door, something like that might be useful. It might be that if it's, you've tried to kind of talk to the people that are making you angry, and you've tried to kind of, communicate, and you've done your best with it. It might be that it's a closed door and they're never really going to get it. Then it might be helpful to do something like an empty kind of chair technique. So you just kind of, sit with a chair in a room and just really go for it as if that person is in front of you, and say everything that you need to say. You can't really say to that person, just to kind of get it out there. Another way to kind of release anger is to write a letter that you don't send the person, but you just write it all down, how that's making you feel. And within it then, when you reflect back on it and you've let that anger release on the paper, you might then have some points that you could take back to that person. There might be something in it that you could actually find a way to talk about, and find that situation to kind of tackle what it is that's made you angry in the first place, about how they've referred to you and what they've inferred by having that conversation with you. So you might find some pointers within it to kind of, to try and communicate that.
I think first time it happened to me, it was like somebody suggested writing it down and writing a blog to help other people. And I thought, what nonsense, it's not going to help me at all. It's not going to stop me from being angry and annoyed and fed up and all the rest of it. And, you know, all the things this person's feeling. And, you know, miraculously, I think it was the first kind of comment I ever got back. And it was like, oh, the two things, somebody else related to exactly how I was feeling, and secondly, I was helping somebody else, and that sort of, in some respects, helped calm things down, you know, personally, as far as my anger was concerned, if that is of any help at all. Kelly, is there anything on chat?
Yeah, I think the chat's kind of gone off, related probably more so to the last question regarding issues in the workplace at the moment.
Right.
That's kind of where we're at in terms of somebody's asked about kind of getting meetings recorded and kind of where things stand with the legalities of that. So people have been offering some advice on that.
Maybe we can come back to that, but I think somebody has answered that. Yes, officially you're not allowed to record anything without letting people know that, and without their permission. So yeah, legally you have to ask their permission in order to do that. Moving on to the next question. I have a bad vertigo problem, and this has been a shock to my whole life. I've never heard of balance problems before this, and I'm so frightened of everything right now. I feel I can't do anything because I am just so scared. Is there a way to stop being scared again? Says this person. Thank you.
I kind of took this kind of question as that somebody was kind of at the kind of, you know, beginnings of kind of that adjustment process. They're talking very much about kind of the shock. Everything's just been kind of blown up. So I think it's about giving yourself kind of time, space, adjust, breathe. So it might be that practicing a bit of relaxation might be helpful right now, just to kind of help you to kind of keep the stress levels down. And I think at those beginning stages, when things are in this sense, you know, you've just kind of come into terms with what's going on, what's happening. It might be then that you need kind of information. And we know that when people are in kind of the first stages of a diagnosis or adjusting to something like this, to manage that shock, you almost need to arm yourself with as much kind of info that you can around your condition, really. So I think it's the time for research and trying to understand how this condition affects you and what you can do about it, what strategies are out there for you. So gather that information, ask whoever diagnosed you, asking your consultant the questions that you need answering. And also keep talking. That's really important at this stage, is to keep talking to people in your life. And things like this, again, this group are good outlets as well for that, aren't they? To kind of keep talking to people about what's going on and how you feel. That's really important, that we don't kind of close off. And I think kind of, Kevin, you alluded to that, didn't you, at the beginning? So that for you, you just shut yourself away. I'm just going to, deal with this. But actually, involve others to keep talking. Coming to this group is going to be really valuable for you now, but also going forwards, obviously. And then it's just trying to work out what's going to help you. What's your kind of plan, really? What's in your kind of coping plan, and what's going to help you to move forwards. And again, in terms of trying to think of things that are going to help you to feel kind of mentally well. Again, think about what might be in kind of a toolbox for you around kind of managing mood, and that might be kind of having this kind of self-soothe box, so something that you collect together, all the different strategies and techniques that help you when you're feeling a bit low, because it's about acknowledging kind of the mental health aspect as well as what you can find out about the condition. It's about looking after both. So eventually you will start to then put into place the strategies that are going to help you cope with the condition itself, but also what you do when you're feeling a bit low and a bit vulnerable and you've got a bit of a dip. So keep that list going as well. So again, I'll put kind of a link to kind of a self-soothe kind of idea, because I think that's important, having a box of things you can do when you're feeling a bit low, because it is going to be, it's going to be challenging and difficult and it's hard. So look after those parts. Yeah. Ellen's putting her thumb up here.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ella. Thanks.
Yeah. Can I just say, I have now had so much offer of help from my GP, from my local hospital, And the way I've got that extra help is by having a lot of falls. And I mean, I've broken my arm, I've bashed my face, I've had the ambulance service give me morphine. And I think because I had evidence in my physical body that I needed help, I've now got help. But it's taken all of that physical evidence for me to get help. And you know, I wouldn't wish anybody to have, you know, broken limbs and have to take morphine to try and get the support that you need. But at the same time, I've got my own strategies. And when Professor Ray told me you've got an anxious problem, I said, I'm not anxious. I was in denial so much. And I think that was part of my problem. I do think you need to talk about, you know, the issues that cause you problems, because I actually denied it. I was saying to Professor Ray, no, I'm not anxious, you know, and he said, well, I think I'll give you this book to read. And once I started reading the book, I found, yes, I am anxious, but sometimes it's having more knowledge helps. And one of the things I found with people around me, they now support me by saying, Ella, say the words big steps, because that helps me to keep my balance. So when I go, I mean, I've even joined a church, and people will come along to me and say, now, Ella, big steps. Does that make any sense to you, Rupal?
It does, yeah. It definitely does. Ella, look, we'll come back. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes.
And we'll come back towards the end, if that's all right, for
yes,
you know,
okay.
comments as well.
And I think,
okay.
yes, I think it's the triple PD that's been the worst thing for me.
All right, Ella, thank you for sharing. I'm going to move on because we've got a few more questions to get through. And then we'll do questions at the end, if that's all right with everyone. But Ella, once again, thank you for that. Would ACT be more effective than CBT for trauma is the next question, if you believe it has contributed to vestibular problems. And do all clinical psychologists offer ACT? I have to admit, I've never heard of it until today.
ACT. So ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and then CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. I think in terms of do all clinical psychologists offer ACT or have that approach? No, not necessarily. It depends on kind of that therapeutic orientation. So everyone will have their own kind of theories that they kind of incorporate into their work. So you may not find that as a blanket thing that everybody will offer you. So you might want to check in terms of if you're going to kind of carry forward therapy with somebody, particularly privately, to make that choice and help make that choice if it's something that you feel is going to help you. In terms of guidelines, in terms of like NICE guidelines, so CBT, there's still kind of a lot of evidence for CBT and use with trauma. There's also a technique called EMDR, which again is in the NICE guidelines for 2018. So that's again another technique that if people have a preference to have EMDR, then that's in the NICE guidelines as another approach or technique for trauma. So in terms of ACT, I mean, I know that there's evidence is coming, and I think there's a book that's just been kind of released by Russ Harris, I think it is, that is about kind of ACT for trauma. So it is happening. It is kind of becoming more mainstream, as it were. So yes, there will be therapists out there with that approach as well. Okay.
Brilliant, thank you. The next question says, unlike other illnesses or health problems I've ever had, my balance condition is always present in my mind from the moment I wake up to until I sleep that night. It's in my mind as I get constant reminders every time I move or try to balance or look at things. So I get no rest from this and find that very tiring and very depressing. How can I stop this from happening or stop the constant reminders wearing me down? I will try anything, but at the moment, my only respite is sleep.
Yeah, it's difficult. Sounds like hard work there. And there's a lot there, suggested that coming to terms with your health condition and the adjustment has been very hard. We're hearing what's kind of coming through on all these questions, we're getting kind of similar kind of themes, aren't we? And similar things coming through for people. And again, what is important perhaps here is to recognise that not to compare yourself with how you might have coped with other health problems or other challenges in your life, as we said in a previous question, and kind of, chastising yourself, because situations are different. And sadly, all it is that your coping mechanisms, the way that you usually cope with adversity and challenges, are just not applying to this situation. It doesn't mean that you can't kind of cope and you won't find your way. It's just that you need a few different tools, that's all. And then think about, you might find it kind of easier in terms of an end goal to think about, stop perhaps engaging in kind of a fight with that condition and just focus on, look, I need to kind of, adjust to this to now. And again, it's just then focusing on what is in my control. What can I do something about right now? What can I do? And tuning into those thoughts. So one of the things that is in your control is perhaps challenging your thinking, because at the moment it feels like you're getting into kind of these kind of chains. So you're thinking one thing about yourself and then it's leading on to others. So, I think the question was about difficulty, trying to use your words that you said, move. So every time that you move, so I'm having difficulty with moving, that can then lead in our minds to, oh, great, I can't move, I'm having difficulty doing that. That can then lead to, oh, I can't do anything, which then leads to, I'm useless. So you can see how one thought that we're having can then start to link into past experiences we've had, past thoughts we've had about ourselves, and we start to go off into these chains of negative thinking. So one thing that perhaps might be helpful to you is to learn to kind of challenge those kind of negative thoughts. It might be useful to kind of do that, and I'll include some techniques of how to kind of learn to challenge thoughts. And again, the diffusion technique we talked about, like the leaves on the stream, mindfulness, those techniques might be helpful right now, just to allow you to switch off this kind of getting hooked into negative thoughts and off we go with them. Learning a technique like that might just help you to kind of, just stay where you're at and not go into all these thoughts and what they mean for you. In terms of then kind of an ACT approach, coming back to ACT and the idea around values. So one thing that you might want to kind of sit and do is to kind of think about, what is kind of important to you, the different roles that you hold. So, as a parent, a friend, whatever it is, work colleague, neighbour, whatever it is, all those different roles that you hold. It could be about being in the community as well, spiritually, whatever it is, just kind of think about kind of your life and the values that you hold. And then once you've kind of done that and thought about that, then you can kind of think about goals setting from it. So the ACT approach will think about what's important to you in that role, what's the importance of it, and then you define a goal coming from it. So then you would write a goal that's realistic based on what you can manage right now, rather than kind of an unrealistic goal. So it might be something like that approach. So again, I'll kind of signpost to some resources around values, because I think that might be a useful approach to you.
Thanks, Lynnette. Kevin?
Yeah, just on that one, Lynnette, it certainly affected me, and I think it does a lot of people with balance conditions. But the example I give is, if I'd broken both legs, there'd been plaster and I wouldn't move, no one would expect me to move, and it'd be pretty obvious. But if I sat still, I could probably forget for quite a while every day I've broken my legs. The difference, certainly I found with my balance condition, is almost every second there was a surge or a noise or an impulse going through my brain to do with being not balancing correctly, or worrying, am I going to have another attack, that sort of thing. Is there any technique where you can actually almost desensitize to what is this constant bombardment in your head? You're never allowed to forget a balance condition. Most conditions, just the slightest movement, looking at a screen that scrolls, so looking down and looking back up again, all of this constantly hits you. I know my answer was eventually to desensitize to it, but it took way too long. It took years to get over it. Are there any techniques to do that, to actually be able to say, I know this input's happening in my mind, but how do I turn it off or turn it down?
So I think that's it, what I was saying about, it becomes like a chain, doesn't it? Because we start to think, oh, I can't do this, and then we're starting to it rolls on, doesn't it? So that we just keep presenting it. So
I'd be interested to hear from others. For me, it was almost like every 5-10 seconds I get a wave going through, a bit like travel sickness. Others were because of something I've seen or I've moved, and it's that constant wearing down that tells you every 10 seconds there's something wrong with me, which you don't get with a lot of other illnesses if you're not using that part of the body or whatever. Even when I'm stationary, I would get these inputs saying your balance isn't working. And I just wondered if there was a specific technique to almost numb or calm down that, how you respond to those inputs, which normally a normal functioning brain, you want that input to go, oh my goodness, what's going wrong? Am I about to fall over? I don't know if that makes sense.
Annabelle, is your hand up from now or earlier? And if it was from earlier, my apologies. If it's for now, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello. Yes, it's now. Yes, it's something I suffered with dreadfully. After just having a couple of dizzy attacks, I kept thinking about my balance constantly, day in, from the moment I woke up in the morning to the first time you go to the kitchen, everything, watching the telly, everything. And it's still to a certain extent, but Professor Ray explained that it's called hypervigilance. It means your brain is constantly on hyper alert. And what it was explained to me is that because your balance function comes to the front of your brain instead of being in your subconscious. So that what normally, when in normal life, all balance function is looked after by your subconscious, but when you've had an attack on it, it comes to your conscious. And the only way he could help me to put that right was to put me on to SSRI. In my case, I take paroxetine, a very small dose. And it was explained to me that they put, it's not just to control anxiety, it's actually to stop the brain overreacting to every situation. So that's the medical answer. But certainly that's what's helped me.
Great.
Thank you for that.
brilliant.
Sorry, what's SSRI? Just out of it, I don't know what that is.
Sorry, I'm fiddling back with my mute. It's an anti-anxiety it's a serotonin uptake inhibitor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
There's several different ones of them, and I think it was venlafaxine. He recommended one, but I'd had experience of Seroxat, and so I went back on to paroxetine. It is, but it really, really does help with that hypervigilance issue. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Annabelle.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question. We've still got a couple of more questions to get through, and then hopefully we can open up the floor. So this question says, why does my condition vary so much? One day I can have poor balance and lots of falls. I've been referred to a consultant who listened very well and gave me good feedback. Is there a link to trauma experienced in childhood? Does stress make the condition worse? Can you give me strategies to help? I have tried a number of psychologists who've tried to help me. What are the options if this person perhaps wants to see you, Lynnette, or someone in Northampton?
So I think in terms of like myself helping it, if you live in Northampton, then I wouldn't be able to, we wouldn't be able to kind of work with you in that way, and I don't work privately, so I'm not sure in terms of what's in your area in terms of psychology support for people with health problems. I don't know whether that's attached to your provision in terms of where you live. I don't know about that part of it. I think kind of in terms of what you kind of did talk about, we talked about kind of varying in health conditions already, haven't we? We kind of mentioned really about that. In terms of stress, I would say yes, in the sense of, yes, I would see it as that any health difficulty could then lead to kind of experiences of feeling quite stressed. So yes, I think, you know, stress can kind of link to making a health condition feel worse. So if we feel like we're not coping, again, you might experience anxiety, and that might mimic some of your health symptoms. So it can get confusing as to what relates to what. So that can happen, and then we can start to catastrophizing. Then we start to think we can't cope with things. So I think in terms of that and techniques, it's about going back to this idea around, regular relaxation is something that might be useful to you. There's also an importance on doing things that you enjoy and not just kind of the mundane things. So having nourishing activities, and importance of kind of self-care as well. So doing things that are looking after you, making sure you've got fun in there. So things that where your balance condition isn't an issue. So having experiences of that in your life as well are really important. And I think in terms of kind of thinking about trauma, so what I would say about kind of trauma is that if you've experienced difficulties and traumatic events, then they can perhaps make us more kind of vulnerable in terms of our mental health in other times in our lives. And it may be that if we haven't had the best start in life for whatever reason, then we may not have been taught how to develop self-soothe strategies. We may not have those as readily as other people might have had growing up and those experiences. So it may be that, and again, approach called compassion focused therapy, which we've mentioned, CFT, is quite a good approach because it talks about kind of the different systems that we're kind of driven by, and one of those systems is our self-soothe system. So it's about trying to bolster that up and boost that up is important, because then if you've kind of developed some strategies around that, hopefully they will help you in terms of, you know, your health condition. So they will help you to manage the anxiety, manage the stress reaction. So yes, that's how I would kind of envisage kind of the trauma link in terms of health conditions, and where that kind of may help you and may be something to look at in terms of therapy or going for therapy that might be useful for you.
Okay.
That was all in that one. Yeah.
Brilliant. And one final question, which I haven't sort of managed to pre-read, sadly, so I'm going to go for it. If I make a mess of it, I apologise. Issues I'm currently dealing with are grief, resentment from VM isolation, vestibular migraine, I'm assuming that is, in particular from a lack of understanding from other people. My life before chronic migraine and vestibular was working, playing all kinds of sports. I was a decent tennis and squash player, weight training and jogging. What really gets me is when people say, oh, you're looking better than the last time I saw you, when I feel the same all the time. I rely on daily medications. So there's a number of different medications that this person is on, including injections for migraine preventative, diazepam, and other medications I can't pronounce for mood and anxiety and bipolar. I stick to the prescribed dose by the GP and ENT and neurologist. Have had bad experience from social workers, etc. But I now have a full team of support, excellent parents, neurology, ENT, VRT, social and support worker, psychotherapist. Question I'd like to ask is, what are the best coping strategies, goal settings, adjusting to this new life with the combination of mental health, migraine and vestibular issues?
Yeah, so I think kind of in terms of what you said about the sport aspect, so to pick up on that, it comes back again to this idea around values and the importance of sport was clearly something that was a big feature of life in the past. So again, deconstruct, think about what is it that, by playing sport, what is it that was important to you about it? What is it that brought meaning to you? What aspects of being sporty and engaging in those sports was the thing that helped you? So it might be that you can find another way to pursue some aspects of the value. So it might be that actually being outdoors was a big part of that sport in, whatever sport you did, it might be about that. So then, okay, can I find other ways then to be outdoors and maintain that connection? So it's about understanding sometimes what makes up something that we're really passionate about, and is there a different way that you could pursue it, something different that you can do. The other thing about kind of goal setting, so I can give some resources around kind of goal setting and how we set goals, and we do that by setting what's important to you, so why you're developing the goal in the first place, then looking at the what, and then the how, so all the little mini goals, all the little mini steps. And we do that based on the goal being something that is specific, something that you can measure, something that's realistic, achievable. So all those things are a key part to goal setting. So again, I can highlight an aspect of that. And I think your question kind of, how do we cope? What are the best coping strategies? I think it kind of sums up, and we've touched on many of the things basically today, haven't we? That it's about learning, okay, my sense of control over my life has gone a bit here with the health problem I've got. I'm losing control. I don't feel like I know where I'm going. So how do I kind of get back on track? And part of that is to try not to kind of compare yourself to these kind of past versions of yourself. It might not be helpful right now. You can still be you, and hopefully, as time moves on, things will then improve, and you can be more of you. So try to think about, for now, what's going to help you, and is that about expectations that you're either placing on yourself or other people are placing on you? Can you be more flexible around those? Can you soften the way that you talk to yourself or the expectation that you place on yourself? What can you do to kind of manage those things? And then just focusing on that package of care. I think this person has clearly kind of pulled together a lot of useful things in terms of consultants, medication, family, friendship support, psychology, social support where needed, benefit support where needed. So pull things together as best as you can. Not everybody has all those things, at the same time. So pull together what you can. Look for those resources to help you through this. And don't neglect that impact on your mental health. So seek help for your mental health in its own right. Don't suffer on in silence. And then thinking about the key things that would underpin any work I would do with people would be around values, which we've talked about, this ACT approach, values, living what you want to do, what's important to you, goal setting as a part of that, but realistic goal setting, the activity scheduling that we talked about at the beginning, pacing, activity, thinking about that, assertiveness, learning to be more assertive, learning to say no, how we communicate with other people, relaxation, well-being, having that in place, self-care, and importantly, having ways in which you can kind of cope with setbacks, either physically, strategies that help you with your condition if you have a setback, but also psychologically, what will help you when you're having that setback and you feel like you're back at square one, because you'll never be back at square one. All the time you're moving forwards, you've picked up strategies, things that are going to help you, that are in your toolkit. So it is going to happen. You are kind of moving forward. You're never back at square one. And I think that kind of, summarises, all the questions today that people have kind of raised, really. Those are the key things that I would talk with people about.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lynnette.
Okay.
I think you're at the end of the scheduled questions.
Yeah.
But there's a couple that have just come in over the kind of course of the couple of hours that I just want to put to you, if that's okay. So somebody asked quite early on in the meeting about whether you've got any tips for navigating leaving events earlier than anyone else. They put that they don't, because we don't always look ill, and that they're trying to obviously pace themselves and leave before it gets too worse.
Yeah.
They found that their family understands that she gets vertigo attacks, but it can be disappointed when they have to leave an event early, which then makes them want to stay longer and push themselves, which kind of negates the point of obviously the pacing, doesn't it? So just some tips if you've got on that, please, would be really handy. That's
it. I think you're only going to do it by that experience of having left, because they're not going to change their behaviour in terms of going, just stay for 5 more minutes. They're not going to necessarily change that behaviour or that dynamic until you do leave at the time you say you're going to leave, and forewarn. So it is about giving people the heads up that I'm going to come, but this is the time I'm going by. So everyone's aware of what's going on. The people that need to know, of course, everyone's aware, everyone's up to speed. And then you've got to kind of carry it out, because otherwise that expectation won't change and people will expect you to do the same.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Lynnette. And then another one we've had, now you'll have to explain it because I have never heard of it before myself, so I don't know if there's others on the call that might not have heard of it either, but somebody's asked about how do you deal with Alice in Wonderland syndrome and then / auras.
I don't know what that is, sorry. My ignorance as well. Sorry, I've never heard of it.
No, I've never heard of it.
No.
Heard of?
I don't know.
Yeah, Alice in Wonderland syndrome.
Apologies, I don't know.
I'm not seeing.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
I guess auras, is that kind of like a migraine kind of related thing, is it? Auras? So,
Annabelle, I think. Is that you? Annabelle,
Yeah.
do you just want to explain what it is?
yes, explain.
Hello, me again.
Hi.
Yes, I'm fascinated by this because my daughter has it,
Oh.
and I had no understanding that it was part of any of these conditions at all. But it's when she tries to rest and goes to sleep, she says she feels big and small at the same time.
Mm.
And I said, what? And she said, I've always had that. And she never told me as a child. She said she's always had these sensations of being very, very tiny, but having huge hands and limbs. I was absolutely gobsmacked, no idea what it is. So interested to share with whoever posed the question to actually understand it myself. And I had no idea it was related to anything like this.
Yeah.
There you go, Kevin. That's another one to add to the list.
Imagine it's in mine. I've never heard of it. Yeah.
Amy's got a hand.
I get that.
Ah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's a migraine thing, vestibular migraine thing. The way I get it is sometimes I feel like everything around me is getting bigger and swelling up. Sometimes it feels like my head's over there and my legs are stretched out, or my torso is suddenly really massive. Yeah, it's really peculiar and really horrible. It's a migraine thing. So I found that if you can treat the migraine, get the migraine under control, the Alice in Wonderland feelings get under control as well. Propranolol helped pretty much get rid of it, but then I had to stop taking it because of the side effects. But yeah, I just find that looking after the migraine side of things, so getting your sleep, sorting out your medications, the stress, the general migraine things helps with the Alice in Wonderland syndromes. Yeah, it's a very peculiar and very unpleasant sensation, especially when you're trying to get to sleep.
Gosh, yeah. Gosh, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you for offering that up, Amy. That's really
Thanks for the help. Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
I think I'm just scanning. Unless I've missed anybody else's question, unless I've picked anything else. I think what's coming more recently. Hang on. I'm not sure if we've covered this one already, Lynnette, but somebody's asked, can past trauma and mental health issues over a long period of time be the cause of vestibular migraine and triple PD, or is it more of a genetic thing or resulting from like an inflammation or infection?
So I would say never to, kind of have that link of kind of that, a trauma has kind of caused something, but I think it's more about trying to think about, that kind of, in terms of vulnerability or your mental health, traumas aren't going to help that kind of process, are they? So I think it's about understanding, yes, if I have some help around kind of the trauma, then that might help my general kind of well-being and my ability to kind of, cope with other things. So, I wouldn't make that link, but I don't know whether that is a thing that other people would say, yes, actually there is a link. I don't want to comment further than that.
Okay, brilliant.
But, yeah.
Then we've got Sandy who's got a question. Sandy, hi Sandy.
I sent Kevin an email and I've got two devices going on here and I can't get to my email right now, but I don't remember what the email was about. Do you still have that, Kevin?
I probably do, Sandy, but not to hand this moment. But
okay.
So carry on.
I don't quite remember. It was something about going to see a certain kind of therapist, cognitive therapist. But, okay, so you go and see a cognitive therapist or any therapist really, and you sit down and chat and you tell him what's going on with you. What can they really do is the bottom line, really. What can they do? I mean, you're living your life with all this crap. Most of the time I don't go anywhere because I'm sick most of the time. I don't have spinning. I have what's called brain spins. My brain is spinning. My eyes are in constant movement, so I have like a catch-22 with vestibular neuritis. But what can they really tell you? How can they really help you?
So I think, yes.
If I just say from a layman's point of view, for myself, and remember, I've been on this journey for 17 years. The thing that's helped me, and I never sought professional help, and I wish I had. And the point I would make is what I've learned over 17 years, which, Sandy, doesn't stop all the bad stuff. And if you're having a vertigo attack, you're having an attack. But the things I've learned is how to, I mentioned it earlier, desensitize to a lot of things that used to cause me so much upset, so much anger, so much fear. And whether you call it a Jedi mind trick or whatever, but I was able to get to a stage, even now I can get a sudden strange surge in my mind that 15 years ago would have literally have me throwing up or worse of fear that something bad was going to happen. Now my mind, I've trained my mind to go, it's just a surge. And I don't know how you quantify that, because I say we're not professionals, but hopefully by talking and these consultations, we as individuals learn more how to control our mind, to stop all that waste of life of sitting there in fear, scared, panicking, thinking, is my life over? Is it going to get worse? So as a layman, Sandy, I'd just say talking to anyone's great. Talking to a professional, we hope we would learn techniques that just help us live in a better way, whatever our physical problems are, symptoms, that we get to deal with it in a better way. Certainly what this support group's about is speeding up that learning so we don't waste so many years like I did. That's my layman's answer. Lynnette, I'll let you do the professional one now.
Well, I guess that's it. I guess, everything that we've kind of talked about today, when we did that kind of summary at the end of kind of that last question, had some ideas about, how do I cope, what strategies, if you need some further help with any of those things about, thinking about your identity, thinking about how you communicate with others, having somewhere, that space that you can talk about how this has impacted your life, that's away from family and friends, that you don't want to keep talking to about it, that you've got your own space that then might generate some ideas, some problem solving, for how to move things forward, managing low mood, managing anxiety, all those kind of techniques and skills that we can kind of share with people, the things that we've talked about today, and it might be that, psychology is not the way forward for you, but if, anything that we've talked about today, that's all what we would talk about with you one-to-one. And help you to move forward with. So if anything has sparked an interest in whatever we've talked about today, it's all psychology, what we've talked about. They're all things. So if you need any further help with any of those things, it might be, one-to-one is a good way forward for you.
Yeah, good. Okay. Thanks, Sandy. Thank you.
But
Lynnette, again, layman oversimplification. For me, it's been a journey of trying to stop things bothering me that were bothering me. If that makes it, it's that simple. That initially I had no control, everything bothered me. Now I've just been able to work through it and go, right, that no longer bothers me. So the same rubbish still happens, but it doesn't get to me, and that means I lead a better quality of life. As I said, I don't know how. If I could bottle it, I'm sure I could make millions. But it's something just over the years I've learned to not let things bother me. But that's it. Any more questions out there from anyone now? I think we've done this. This is a record session of 2 hours 10 minutes. May I say, Lynnette, thank you so much for your time of giving your time to ourselves on a Saturday. It is brilliant. Thanks again to the members for such great questions.
Yeah, great questions.
No, they really are, and I say this on most meetings. The joy of this is we video it, record it. So many thousands of people in the future will benefit from what we've gone through today. I assure you. So it's really worth doing. But
Can I just jump in as well? If people want to save the chat, please do so before it disappears. So if you've got, I think there are some links and things like that on there.
On the chat now, I've learned how I can put a copy of it on an email to all the members, so they will be able to download it. Also, in a few days, there'll be a link to the video. Hopefully, there'll be lots of links that Lynnette's going to give to us on many of the things that have been mentioned today. And again, that will be emailed to all the members. And I think last thing to say is don't forget Saturday, August the 20th, because we'll be back again for another exciting group meeting. But thanks everyone. And today, if anything has come out of it, is how inevitable it almost is with any balance condition that there will be some form of anxiety, some form of emotional distress. So that is normal. We just all want to work together to minimize that. So we can move on. But thanks everyone, really great session. Thanks all for coming, and we'll see you again in August. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye everyone. Bye bye.